Hunstanton, a town on Norfolk's north-east coast, situated on the southern shore of the Wash, an inlet of the North Sea between Norfolk and Lincolnshire. Zooming onto the beach, beneath the red and white cliffs of Old Hunstanton, reveals what appears to be the outline of a ship's hull. Now forlorn and rusting, the remains of the steam trawler Sheraton hide a history very different from that which she was designed for. Built in 1906 and launched a year later at Cook, Welton and Gemmell's Yard in Beverley in the East Riding of Yorkshire, the Sheraton went on to trawl the North Sea from her home port of Grimsby. Unable to find any images of the Sheraton in her early years, I came across this photo of another steam trawler known as the Dyas, shown in the 1920s. Like the Sheraton, she was launched as the Viola at the same yard in Beverley in the same year and to a very similar build, with the Sheraton being slightly larger. Miraculously, the Dyas or Viola still exists, albeit in a perilous condition, in Grytviken in South Georgia. 1914 saw war with Germany, and along with hundreds of her sister vessels, the Sheraton was requisitioned by the Navy and re-employed as a boom protection vessel. When peace came 4 years later, she returned to her intended role of trawling the North Sea out of Grimsby once more. However, at the close of the 1930s, the dark clouds of war with Germany were gathering again, and the Sheraton was requisitioned once more in 1942, this time having a 6-pounder gun mounted forward to enable her to patrol the North Sea on the lookout for submarines and other enemy vessels. At the end of World War II, she was retained and converted into a towed RAF target vessel. Greatly altered, stripped of equipment and painted bright yellow, the Sheraton was anchored off Brest Sands on the Wash's Lincolnshire side on the evening of April the 23rd, 1947, when during a severe gale she parted her anchor and drifted south across the Wash before finally beaching upon Hunstanton's shoreline. Attempts were made to refloat her, but these would appear to have failed, hence the reason that she still rests in the sand some 77 years later. At the time of her launching, the Sheraton measured 130 foot long by 23 wide, and with a draft of 12 feet, while unladen she displaced 120 tons. As you can see, she's a shadow of her former self. There was a large amount of metal salvaged, taken soon after her abandonment, and obviously countless tides and the elements have not been kind to her. As a result, what you see of the Sheraton today is largely her keel, a couple of feet of hull, and a number of fittings which still cling on to existence. So, looking at her stern, that must be the remains of the rudder, or at least the rudder post, while in that gap would have been her propeller driven by the 92 horsepower engine. And making my way forward along the port side, the wreck today shows, I think it's around a 16-degree list, which allows more of the port side to rise above the sand. Even so, other than the ribs and bottom of the hull, there's little that I can identify. Apparently, the Sheraton's build is comprised of an internal wooden carcass. That's a kind of, it's like a framework which was then clad in the steel hull and superstructure. But as I look so far, there doesn't appear to be any of that wooden frame visible, just, you know, plenty of corroded metal. I'm close to the bow now, and more of the hull is preserved here. And arriving at the bows, which despite the deterioration in the hull, it's still easily identifiable, and that's considering the vast majority of the structure has now disappeared. Now here's some of that interior wooden carcass, you know, the frame is visible and it's still relatively intact. You see it there, like a framework with those vertical plugs sticking upwards. And considering the batter it must have taken over the years, it's surprising any wood still exists. What would be useful and of interest is a drawing of the Sheraton to enable us to have an idea of where what we are looking at would have been found when the ship was intact. So to fulfill that, here is a drawing from Hutton Press's book Cook, Welton and Gemmell. Not of the Sheraton, unfortunately, but the aforementioned Dias or Viola. Remember, her build was very similar, with the Sheraton being slightly larger. So returning to the wooden carcass, this would have been located in approximately this position, which would have been where the ship's catch of fish was stored, the frames likely once supporting large metal tanks. Now this is interesting. It looks like masses of concrete set into the bottom of the hull between the ribs, and this is likely to have been installed when built and used as ballast to stabilise the ship's buoyancy. Here's some more, but notice it's a different colour. This is grey, the other was reddish. And you can see the stanchions and ribs sticking through. I've actually heard that additional concrete was added to the wreck to stabilise it, and it looks weird as fittings like this appear to sprout from it. And I'm wondering if there's another one there, and I'm wondering if this is the concrete that was added after she was beached. So referring to our drawing, I believe that the concrete could be located in this part of the ship, in which case it would have been beneath the boiler, wheelhouse and funnel. In front of me looks like that this could have once been one of the holding tanks which used to store the caught fish, and if it was, how ironic that today it's full of fish. Now, could that be a stump of the mast with the, you know, like it's like a metal collar, the corroded metal, which would have fitted into the deck? I wonder if it is. It certainly could be. That's fascinating. Well, after a bit of research, I found out that this is indeed a section of the Sheraton's foremast and collar attachment. It was found buried in the sand in September 2009 by a member of a team surveying the wreck for the Adopt a Wreck scheme. The remains of the mast would have been located here. I haven't found any records indicating as to whether the Sheraton was involved in any action with enemy vessels. Regardless of this, I think her silent, rusting remains are a fine testament to her and all those trawlers and their crews who were called up to face terrifying challenges during the two world wars.